I will keep this brief, but I want to just thank some people that I'm shocked Robert did not mention, our community partners who have stepped in and supported this exhibition and our forthcoming Sue Wrbican sculpture in the park, Reston Community Center, Reston Town Center Association, and Arts Council of Fairfax County, which is now known as Arts Fairfax, has supported this project and will continue to support this project through to the outdoor sculpture. So thank you to all of them, and thank you, Robert, for all of your support. This has been a really incredible experience, and this is a bittersweet evening since it is our last programming we're doing for Sue's show, but Sue has really brought the community together through this work, and I was introduced to Molly through another colleague, but it was over Sue that we connected, and so I feel very grateful for that. I have Molly's biography that I'm going to read. Before I do, another housekeeping thing and invite you all to our next program. This will be coming down, sadly, this weekend is the last opportunity to see it. So send all of your friends who keep saying that they mean to come out here and see the show. They better do it now. Last chance. And on December 2nd, we are throwing the first ever monster drawing rally of Northern Virginia, and I think the DC area. The Monster Drawing Rally is a really, really fun community building fundraiser event in which we're inviting artists to come and make work here on site in the gallery for everyone to witness, and then it will be available for purchase. Everything will be $75 only, and instead of an auction where the price keeps rising and people eventually can't afford the $400 million price tag, instead there's a draw of cards, and whoever gets the high card gets to bring home the artwork. If you don't get to purchase the artwork by your favorite artist, well, they're here on site. Go talk to them. Go visit their studio. Make a new friend. It should be really fun. So that's December 2nd. Excuse me, I've had a cold. And tonight, we are very, very honored and grateful to have Molly here. Molly is the curator of contemporary art at the National Gallery of Art in DC. Her current projects include the exhibition Rachel Whiteread, which is presently on view at the Tate Britain in London. After traveling to Vienna, the show will open at the National Gallery in September of 2018, before concluding its tour at the St. Louis Art Museum. And this is just shocking to me, but the Whiteread exhibition is the gallery's first survey to feature a living woman artist. So, really, really good work. Thank you. You may have also seen Molly's recent Barbara Kruger exhibition, which reopened the gallery's East Building in the fall of 2016. It was in one of the towers, a really great show as well. She's worked with the National Gallery to commission the well-known and beloved works of Andy Goldsworthy's Roof and Leo Villarreal's LED sculpture Multiverse, which I think everyone knows is the lights in the tunnel. In addition to these large public installations, her numerous acquisitions for the gallery have helped to transform the collection and really keep it up to date. She's written and lectured extensively on contemporary art and artists, including Byron Kim, Glenn Ligon, Kim Suja, Richard Tuttle, and Ursula Van Ridingsgaard, as well as on art in public spaces. And we are so, so, so happy to have her here. Molly.
Thank you, Lily, and thank you, Sue. Just to follow up what Lily was saying, I met Lily through this common colleague. I met Sue, I think it was 2011, 2012, through an Art World connection, but there's some chance involved in all of this, and I think that's an underlying theme of tonight, kind of found friendships, found objects, lost, you have to lose something to find it, so we didn't know we needed one another, but here we are. So it's a kind of wonderful moment, I think. I wanted to talk about the idea about chance and chance in relationship to surrealism, which Lily writes and defines, writes about its origins in the post-World War I era in Europe, and its development, and particularly around this idea of chance, because I think it's important for Sue's, seems to be important for Sue's work, and this body of work in particular. And I just want to call out the lender of these glasses. Unfortunately left mine at home today. So spontaneous interaction, right, is, it realizes this principle of objective chance, which was defined and put forth by André Breton, who was the leader of surrealism in post-World War I Europe, and basically starting in the mid-20s. And this idea, it's the coming together of the internal drives and desires with the external and apparently coincidental events. And out of this idea of objective chance, the randomness that comes with it, comes Breton's idea of the found object. And he writes about this through a story that he was a beautiful writer, and he was a man of words and a poet, interested in art and poetry, so I think this relates to Sue's practice as well. In this story called Mad Love, and it was published in 1937, he detailed the chance events involved, I'm just going to read this because it's complicated, involved in the production of a sculpture, and in this case it was a spoon that had a little shoe at the end of its handle that he purchased in the Paris flea markets when he was walking around with his pal Giacometti, the others. And it became a catalyst for the fulfillment of his desires. A desire he didn't really know he had, but that was, hidden. So the lost desire was hidden in the recesses of his brain. And it was through the unconscious selection of this object. He bought it, and it wasn't until he went home and put it on a table when it was lit and he wasn't holding it anymore that he said, aha, that's what I've been looking for. That's the slipper, the ash, I'll leave out the part about the word association, but he was after this idea of a container for his desires, and the spoon was that container, essentially. So he then defined the found object. He elevated the status of the found object sculpture above an object that was actually just made through the labor and the deliberation of a sculptor, purely in that mode. He said that the unconscious, the part the unconscious played in the selection of the object elevated it to a different status. The found object sculpture then became inseparable from the forces of love and loss. So there's all this Freudian stuff that goes into surrealism, and I'll spare you all that theory and analysis, but it's really, really deep and rich, and there's a great trajectory that it revealed in the history of art, and I think it's important to understanding Sue's work. But Breton wrote, "It became clear that the object I had so much wanted to contemplate before had been constructed outside of me, very different, very far beyond what I could have imagined." So this idea of what is outside, constructed outside, and then the desires that are inside, the internal, external dichotomy that are going on in this surrealist practice. And part of that practice were the gaming in the titles. The surrealists love to create these playful, wordy titles that they would, artists like Kay Sage, who is kind of the inspiration for some of, it's related to Sue's practice, I'm going to get to that. But Kay Sage and her husband, Tanguy, who made paintings, would make these playful titles that had no relationship to the content of the paintings. They were relating to us an experience outside in their own life, and it's because we don't know exactly what those experiences were. They're kind of a mystery, and so that's part of our job, is to find that relationship, and sometimes they're just not meant to be found. And thus the titles, A Finger on the Drum, there's no drum in this image, by Kay Sage. And so, again, it's this object that has to be lost in the recesses of the mind of the artist in order to be found. And this lost object, when it is found, is ghosted in the surreal object. The surreal object becomes ghost-like. And when I walked into this show, I had this instant aha moment that that's what Sue's doing. She's providing these ghost-like apparitions, these found objects that she's reclaimed and put back out into the world that have essentially, they're her found objects. And they were even, some of them were given to her, but the idea of the found object is, to my thinking, very much part of this installation. So Sue found her sales through some deliberation and some work and some elements of chance. Her sale intentions were where I entered the picture. When I met Sue, she was working on these sale intention works that around 2010, 2011, am I right?
2009.
2009, okay, so right before we met. So, and they're all around. So I'm not showing a lot of Sue's work here because they're around you. So if you haven't looked, please go and look around you. But what I will do is scroll forward through these case ages and show you, this is the first work I had seen by Sue. So where she's working out her ideas with paper before she uses the actual cloth of the sale. And I thought, wow, and I'm still wrestling with the language, to find the language in the recesses of my mind, how to describe this and what it did for me. But when she showed me all these photographs that she took of her sales, these protagonists in different settings, in different places, doing different things, she had kind of staged them like actors, that it became clear to me that this was a whole narrative unraveling, Sue was unraveling for us. And that, you know, when you have a protagonist in a setting, you want to know where they're going, where they came from. You have all these questions about these subjects of the narrative. And so there's a curiosity that comes with Sue's sale intentions. So fast forward to the present, and I didn't know, because I hadn't been in touch with Sue, so I had lost her for a little bit while she was off doing her investigations, that someone by chance had suggested to her, once she was already making these sale intentions. The sale is the protagonist out on the beaches and the landscape. And that she look at the paintings of Kay Sage, the surrealist painter. And if I'm right, this is the one that kind of caught your eye right away, In the Third Sleep from 1944, that bears a uncanny resemblance to some of Sue's work. So Sue was making this work, and then somehow somebody called her attention to this other work. They're not big, these paintings. They're paintings, they're not sculptures. But Sue, you know, identified in them the protagonist, that Kay Sage, and it's never really been talked about in a thorough way, that Kay Sage, the history of art has not given a great voice to this fantastic artist. And through Sue's work, she's ghosting, you know, these found objects and in the space and the installation you're in tonight. And I think it's remarkable what she has done here. So that's the K-Sage part, and there are lots of K-Sage works, but this seemed to be the starting point for this conversation that Sue was having with this surrealist woman artist who was married to a surrealist artist, who was championed, you know, really by Andre Breton, and part of the surrealist enterprise was to question the institutions of authority, including the patriarchal, you know, authority at the time and the present. And she was allowed to, you know, go forward and create a career and build a body of work, and she was supported and shown. Not enough, I don't think, but I think people are just starting to recuperate her career a little bit. And we were very lucky at the National Gallery to receive this work. Sadly, it was in the Corcoran collection, which was sadly it was transferred to the National Gallery, and but by chance, right? This work is now in the collection and is on view, and we're doing our best to call attention to this great body of work. And we have another work which I'll show you in a minute. A very early work, really, 1940. She, you know, had to kind of teach herself. She made her way in the art world and didn't really make her real surrealist, pure surrealist paintings until about 38. But it was a monolith, and it was like a rock, and that's what Breton saw and thought, wow, you know, you're fantastic. And this is kind of coming out of that, this monolithic form coming out of the landscape on the left. And it is up now at the National Gallery. And then a related work, but more maybe moving towards the fabric, the tensile fabric related work, but always an architectural form or frame around the work. Coming into the picture plane, and then there's Sue's great sail intention. You know, even in the paper, Sue's use of paper, it has an architectonic sensibility. You know, it's that crisp form that I think is remarkable here. And then this Wind in the Corner at the Norton Museum, the tensile fabric form is billowing out towards this desert landscape, kind of a sea of nothingness, essentially. And then she turns Sage, this is the other work by her in our collection, also on view. It reminds me of that corner in the East Building apex, in the IMP building, which is so triangular and angular, where we could reconstruct this right there. I think it would be fabulous. But she turns increasingly towards this use of firm structures and scaffolding in architecture. Eventually making this work, Hyphen, that, am I right, this is the model, one of them, that Sue would then go on and look back at and recreate and make and put in the landscape herself. So these windows and doors shuttering and closing, again, this interior-exterior dialogue going on, and what's inside, what's outside, what is found in the recesses, and what is lost and found. And then this work is kind of her what is considered to be her masterpiece, if you will. Following the death of Tanguy, she was just distraught and very, lost, and sometimes through that, just tremendous grief to lose her life partner. This enclosing space of these scaffolds with the fabric figures, you know, these very fragile, willowy, twisted, fraught figures in this strange environment, the atmosphere, you know, which is clouded and it's not clear, it's foggy. And then also there's this strange, singular kind of totemic structure ghosted in the image. And it's very moving, very evocative. And so this is, right, this is just a photo mock-up that Sue made relating to that work. You know, it's an imagined work. It's, again, it's projected as an idea, but not realized. And sometimes those are the most interesting and powerful things in our creative worlds, where we're imagining what is possible and what could be if either the circumstances, for whatever reason, or the logistics don't come together and present themselves. And then this is the work tipped on its side, correct?
Actually, that was the beginning of the work, and then we
Okay.
decided to tear it apart.
Okay.
Because the wood was too thick.
So,
We wanted to go thinner.
right, so
Yes.
I grabbed this off the internet from the Seligman
Yeah.
site, and I just thought it was so interesting because it was, you know, we are suddenly inside. We could really see what it would be like to be inside one of these scaffold-like structures. So it didn't work, I guess, but it was a really wonderful view. You know, it's kind of like getting inside the Kay Sage work, and that is what I think is so remarkable about what Sue has done in this, you know, body of work and these sale intentions. She has put us inside those paintings. She's created we're walking among these monoliths and these spectral visions that Sage had, but that are, you know, common to everyone. Everybody is, you know, it's working inside these surrealist landscapes, and I just find this to be a really, you know, this whole installation is remarkable. So I want to read about Sage's paintings, you know, her architectonic scaffolding forms related, in her case, to a psychic experience she had when she was working in Rome. And it was a recurring dream, essentially. And she was awakened by night by sounds of crackling fire and banging wood. And that's what she kept returning to that image for, was to kind of, you know, resolve this trauma that she was having in her dream. Very interesting idea. So I think that what's remarkable about it, what's common about Sue's work and Sage's work, is that they're famously devoid of people. You know, not in every case, because there's a performance piece that wraps the body, but they certainly evoke, you know, the figure, right? They are surrogates. These forms are surrogates for the figure. They are about the figure and how we understand them, and certainly all the patina that's on this particular sale, which is, I find, just astonishing, all this facture of nature, and it's the mold, I think, from the sale. You just want to know more. How is this stored? Why does this have this patterning on it? It's the human residue, you know, it's the facture of the human touch that is relating to nature, that makes these sales so rich. And this one in particular as a character, you know, you just want to know more about this character. So, and so it's these visual residues of human experience that Sue has made, you know, available through the subconscious choice of these sails. And, you know, I think they speak very powerfully. And in regard to that, Sue and I were talking the other day about the work, and we were talking. She was talking about, and I've sailed in my life, so I understood this, and it hadn't occurred to me until she said it. So that's why I'm really grateful for her ideas. That when you have you have a sail, you're out in the middle of nature, and you need the technical knowledge and the kind of facility to manage that tool really well. And when you can do it, when you can harness the wind with your sail, it's a very powerful force. And I thought, wow, I wasn't thinking about that, but of course, and that is why these surrogates are so powerful, I find, because it's about harnessing and understanding how they work. And I think Sue has done that incredibly here. You know, I've seen the images of the work, but being in the space of the sails is something else. And why we can never, it's hard to replicate the experience of site-specific sculpture. So I'm so grateful to Lily for seeing that in Sue's work and showing it to us. You know, getting the artist, giving her the space, supporting her to make this is a really important thing, and we're all really lucky that I really think that we're going to say we saw this show. You know, there's going to be a time when we're all going to say, hey, we were at Sue Wrbican's show in Reston. So in the same way, Sue saw an affinity in Kay Sage's work, and you know, she found her maybe by chance because a colleague had seen Kay Sage's works and it reminded her of what Sue was doing, and she's carrying forward Sage's work so that it's not dead. These found objects, these found ideas, these found references aren't dead. They're undead. They're ghosted. And that's a very powerful gesture to make. And I think we're all, you know, grateful that Sue has made it. So, thank you. So I'm happy to answer any questions you have. I'm not a surrealism expert. I'm just issuing the disclaimer right away. Yes.
Leslie Nolan, I'm a painter. I just wondered about your own experience as a curator. What are the kind of criteria you're looking for when you're selecting pieces for a show? Do you have a theme in mind first, or does it evolve? And what is your most important criteria for selecting a piece?
Oh,
Is that too big?
That's a big question. It can happen any which way, really, and I think Lily would agree with this. It can happen any which way. You can think about an artist, you can think about an idea, you can think about a space. You know, there are so many different reasons for bringing a work forward into a collection, or you know, it depends on the mission of the place where you're working. That's a defining parameter. So it's a, you know, that is a big question, but there's a lot of data that has to come together for you to move forward with something like that, with an acquisition, but also an exhibition. So, yeah. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think regardless of idea or artwork or space, those are all important factors, but I think it's really, at least for me working in contemporary art and with living artists, it's working with the ideas of the artist and supporting the artwork. So the ideas and the space all come in support of the artwork. So that's really what you were saying, but I think
Yeah, I have this like idea that on our best days, curators are matchmakers.
Right.
You know, we're making matches between any given set of circumstances,
Yeah.
you know? Does that kind of answer things?
Interesting.
Okay. Anything I left out, Sue?
I think what you did was add so much to it that, you know, things that I didn't know or things that I wasn't really fully aware of, like particularly with the surrealists and with Kay Sage and you know, like I always assumed she had dreamed of burning scaffolds, but I didn't know it was the fire that was popping and cracking that she was actually dreaming about. So that's really interesting. And just like the whole background on, you know, the spoon and the foot or the shoe, I didn't know that either. And so I think, yeah, like I feel like what you're talking about is so accurate to what this was about in terms of
Good.
just like letting the experience dictate the next step. So it was really right on, I have to
Good.
say.
Good.
In ways that I wasn't really aware of, so.
Well, so I didn't talk about the fluidity of Sue's practice. It's very fluid, and she's responding, from what I know, is she responds to things, and she's, at the same time, she's open. You know, you can't find the found object if you're not open to the found object. At the same time, she's putting a lot of pressure on herself to refine her practice and her view and what she's after. So she's got a kind of stance, 1 foot inside, 1 foot outside, you know, it's that stance. And I think that sailing as a, you know, metaphor for what Sue does is just so ideal and well suited and well chosen. Because you never know what the weather's going to do. You can't control the wind on a given day, or the conditions, or the waves, or the temperature. So, you know, there's all these other volatile factors. But then when you do kind of harness the means, whatever those means are, if it's a sail, that's one way, then wow, you take off. It's powerful, and it's big, and it's meaningful. And so, you know, I keep thinking that Sue has seen this power in these little paintings and brought them out for me. So,
Yeah,
Very cool.
definitely. It's like the, you know, paintings that I didn't even know